What it does is it allows for a more personal connection at the far end. And there's a lot of smart people writing about return to office and where hybrid works and where hybrid lives. And if you look at a couple different reports about the state of work and you know where folks are working now, and hybrid or remote connection is going to happen for the foreseeable future. I do not see a scenario where we don't ever need video conferencing.
Welcome back to the Teams Insider podcast. This week we have my friend Tim Albright. He's the founder of AVNation. We get into what AVNation is and how that came to be and everything he does in the AV community. And then we talk about how AV and IT are kind of coming together, or as he says, have already come together, and what that means for AV, what that means for commoditization, scale and standardization in the AV and enterprise room space. Really interesting conversation. Thanks to Tim for taking the time. And also many thanks to Audio Codes, who are the sponsor of this podcast. Really appreciate their support of everything we're doing at Empowering Cloud. Hope you enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Excited to have this conversation. I had a few conversations with Tim now offline, but this will be the first one on a pod. Tim Albright, some of you may know the name if you're on the AV side of the house. But Tim, do you want to just give us a little introduction and background to yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Tom, for having me. My name is Tim Albright. I'm the guy who runs AVNation. We are a online media platform that covers the audiovisual space for higher education. You know, your IT managers, tech managers that are responsible for the AV in their corporate boardrooms and huddle spaces and stuff like that. We've been around for about 12, 13 years.
Awesome. And when we first got introduced, it was some striking kind of resemblances to what you seem to have done in the AV community and what we're doing over at Empowering Cloud in the kind of Teams community. Talk us a little bit through that journey, because you were way ahead of me on doing the media, and you have a bit of a media background as well, don't you? Well,
I do, right? There's an old joke, at least in the States, about having a face for radio. So that is where I started, was local radio here in the States. And through a number of situations, I ended up working at a college, Southwest Illinois, just outside of St. Louis, and found myself in the AV industry. And we were supporting 300, 400 classrooms and spaces and stuff like that. And so I was learning an awful lot very quickly about the industry. And after a couple of years of that, it was, okay, this is kind of cool. How do I get more information? How do I find out about what's going on? Latest products, latest whatever. And I looked around, and there wasn't exactly what I was looking for. A couple of folks had almost like audio case studies, right, where they would interview, here's the principal, here's the integrator who put it in. Talked a lot about gear, which was fine, right? But that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for kind of a weekly wrap-up of the news that impacted me in my college, right? Well, how do I take that and how do I find that information? And so took my media background, my radio background and TV background, and we started AVNation. We started with a single podcast, AV Week, which you'll be on here shortly, and it has just remained for the last 13 years. We do it every Friday, post it every Monday. And our goal really is to educate folks whose job it is to support and maintain these systems, and to help them do their job better, right? To give them the information they need to make decisions, to make quality, educated decisions on a daily and weekly basis.
That's awesome. I really appreciate anybody who's doing stuff to kind of get information and share knowledge. It's great, and I do tune into the show. Sometimes it's a bit over my head, but it's nice to be skilling me up in the ways of the AV world.
Well, and you guys focus, like the one thing I like about you guys is you're focused, right? You are laser focused on a specific aspect, and we have to be a little bit broader. So yeah, there's times, a lot of times when it's over my head. I made the joke is I am not smart. I know a lot of smart people, and I hold to that. It's somewhat self-deprecating, but it's true. I was a tech manager. I was a programmer for a short amount of time and a designer, but really, I can ask really dumb questions and people answer me, right? That is, if I have a superpower, that's it. And my dumb questions come from, a lot of it is, I have learned things over the years and garnered things over the years, but it's really kind of, okay, why does that matter? Why do acoustics matter? Why does, this matter? And how does it impact folks, in a college campus or in a corporate campus? And the folks that we have on are really, really smart. And so, I'm able to kind of glean some of their knowledge that way.
Yeah, it's a real skill though to pull that out of people, and I think that's one of the privileges you have with your show, and I kind of have with the podcast. And what we do as well is getting access to people and trying to help them communicate across what they're trying to communicate.
Yeah.
So, what's your perspective, Tim? Our two worlds are definitely either colliding or fully collided, depending on your perspective. But you've been in this space long enough to kind of have seen that happen. What's the perspective from your side of the fence?
I've referenced this, but I'll say it again. There's a dear friend of mine who worked for a control manufacturer 20 years ago. He takes a picture at Infocom, our show over here in the States, and has a big banner above the Infocom show floor that says convergence, right? Well, this is 2004, Tom, right? So we've been talking about convergence for a minute. And quite frankly, it's time to stop talking about it. It's happened. It's done. So let's talk about what that means, right? What does that mean, again, in these rooms and on these campuses? What does that mean? And as far as, where UC and IT and AV, all these things come by, they all support one another, and they all need each other in some way, shape, or form. So how do they leverage their strengths with the other's strengths, right? UC is great, and having the ability to connect people globally right now is fantastic. But guess what? You need IT for that, because without that, well, then you're just talking to yourself. And without a camera and microphone, again, you're just talking to yourself. So all of these worlds kind of interact with each other and intertwine. And realizing that and accepting that is a great first step, and say, okay, great, fantastic. Now, how do we leverage everybody's strengths to make our communication better, to make what we're trying to do better and more seamless for the people that are working in it on a daily basis?
And it feels like certainly what I see from Teams and Teams rooms, and I see the same thing I think with Zoom as well. Like there's a keenness to simplify, to kind of commodify, like just ship kit, get it in. Like thoughts on that, and then thoughts on how that affects the AV space.
Well, so there's a couple of things. Both Zoom and Teams have their certified products, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into the details of how that happens. Teams is a little bit more, Microsoft is a bit more stringent in their certified process, but regardless, you can get both products certified. And that is a couple things. First of all, it helps Microsoft and Zoom on their support side, right? If Tom calls up and says, you know what, my room's not working, and I'm done with Teams, they're going, okay, great. What's in your room? Like what is it? Well, it's XYZ camera, and I've got ABC microphone, and they're going to stop you right there and go, okay, that's fantastic. None of that stuff is certified. Have a nice day, right? Because at that point, you are on your own, because you've taken yourself on your own. You've taken yourself down your own path, which is fine, right? That's your right to do so, and your organization's right to do so. But if you stay in their ecosystem and you stay on their path, then it simplifies their support, and quite frankly, it simplifies and makes your experience better. Now, I'm not going to debate about product A, B, or C, but whether or not it should be certified. That's not my job, right? It's not my job. I am not qualified to tell you whether or not a product should be certified. I trust Microsoft and Zoom to do their due diligence, and then if I'm in that room and I've done everything that Microsoft has told me to do, or Zoom has told me to do, then I expect a certain level of experience. And that really is what Microsoft is after. They're after a seamless experience. They're after a repeatable experience. It's a bit like Starbucks, right? I'm a huge coffee buff. I love coffee. It's my thing, right? And if you ever hear Howard Schultz talk about the Starbucks experience and the fact that they have grown as much as they've grown in the last 30 years or so, right? The way they've done that is they start out very small, and they specialized in that experience in the coffee shop, right? And now, regardless of whether you go to a coffee shop in London or St. Louis, you're going to get roughly the same experience, the same coffee, right? Same thing with Microsoft. They're trying to, and I'm going to use commoditized in a good way here. They're trying to commoditize that experience across the board, regardless of where you are in the world, through these various programs they have.
Yeah, that's definitely the objective, is to have consistent experience for the users, isn't it? And it started off in the early, what was Skype Room Systems, then kind of then MTR. It was that there weren't tons of options to get really smart, but now we've got third-party proper DSPs, we've got ceiling tile mics, we've got like lots of the peripherals are getting certified, and you can do some quite advanced stuff staying in the certified ecosystem these days. Yeah,
absolutely. And you mentioned good old Skype rooms. I mean, when I first put in my first video conferencing system, and this was early 2000s, the college I worked for, we were in Southwest Illinois, just outside of St. Louis, and so we were kind of a hub in connecting more rural areas, right? Place where I live we're close to farmland, and so the high schools and the colleges out there pretty far away, right? And so we put in a Tandberg system, and I said Tandberg, right? Cisco bought Tandberg, if you're not familiar.
I remember.
And it was $50,000 per system, and we put in 4. So we had one on our campus, and then we connected 3 other high schools for continuing education. And you had to book the room, right? It was a whole thing. It was a finite number of equipment that you could use, and it was stupid expensive. I mean, $50,000, so it was a $200,000 system, right? To connect 4 locations, right? The thing that has happened over the last 20 years now is, yes, some commoditization of those products, but also the realization that you don't need a dedicated piece of hardware. That's what your computer's for, right? Let's leverage that, because at that time that one of the biggest expenses was the actual codec, the device that took the video and audio in and out. But it's allowed for a lot more flexibility. It's also allowed for a lot more creativity. It's allowed companies like Shure to come up with the MXA system and Sennheiser to come up with the Team Connect, because they could say, oh, we can connect to these systems. Okay, great. Well, we're going to go over here and we're going to spend a couple $1 million developing something that does just one thing, right? That does audio better than anybody else, right? And all that other people debate whether or not this Sennheiser is better or the Shure is better. But that's what they've done is these shrinking down of these systems and putting them on our own PCs or laptops or whatever has allowed these companies that do something really, really well to focus on that and to give the customer the best possible experience, as opposed to 20 years ago, it was just whatever we could get.
Yeah, and I feel like that's really unlocked our world to beyond just, certainly when they came in, I had a lot of pushback around fine for this type of room, but not for this scenario, not for this type of room, not for the important ones. And I think that a lot of that has been pushed away now with the kind of advanced certified peripherals we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you find it from an AV perspective, AV community perspective, around like education? Like, I feel like it's interesting on both sides here. Like I see a lot of IT people who don't understand or even properly value the AV skill of setting the room up right and the acoustics and the right actual kit, and kind of on the other side of the fence, the AV people were not really understanding how you hook something up to Teams and how the accounts work and how all that perspective. Does that resonate? Have you seen that?
It does, and it's a bit. it's a bit like silos, unfortunately, still. And some of it is a lack of education, it's a lack of understanding of what each of those teams is trying to do and the skill set that's required to get there. I have all kinds of respect for IT professionals. They've gone through all kinds of training. They got certifications that I could only dream of getting, and so their job is to keep the network up, keep it secure, right, and make sure that everybody has what they need. AV, on the other hand, also requires a lot of skill and certifications, and their job is to make sure that the people that walk into a room, they can communicate the way that they want to communicate. And a lot of times it's those two teams going, well, I need X, Y, or Z, right? I need all the ports open, which is a phrase I know, and I know what it means, and I know that's a dangerous thing. So in the IT folks are like, well, wait a minute, hang on, no, you don't. And the AV guys are like, no, we do, because the manufacturer says we need all these things open. And they come at it with just enough knowledge of their own little vertical, of their own little silo, to be dangerous, without considering what that means to the other side. So yeah, IT, shut down all the ports. But if you do that, well, then none of our video conferencing systems work. Well, that's a problem. So AV, you don't open up all the ports, silly, because that's a security risk. And so they both sides, I think, need to educate themselves more than they have on what the other side is trying to do and the skill set it requires.
Yeah, I know Microsoft have been pushing hard with kind of the rooms training and things to help understand. And I'm sure the other side is true. What I think the challenge with AV is like a lot of the things that AV does well are sort of invisible, like making the audio great. You can't see you can feel when it's bad, but you can't see what they've done to make it good. Or just thinking about the most appropriate kit. I've seen some terrible installs with bar systems where they've just put way beyond their spec, but IT think because the camera can see the person, the audio is going to pick up, which is absolutely not the case.
Not the case. No, it's I'm of the opinion that without audio, you don't have a video conferencing system. That's just my opinion. You can't have a conversation. Now, yeah, you can. If you know either American Sign Language or International Sign Language, you could technically have a conversation if both people know it. But for the vast majority of us, without audio, there's nothing, right? There's no form of communication. And that's actually why I would suggest, and if anybody ever asks my opinion about a system, which is very rare, it's like start with a good microphone, right? Start with a good microphone. I don't care what that is, right? And whatever's good is subjective. But make sure that the far side can hear you well and can hear everybody in the room well. Then work on the speakers. We haven't gotten to video yet, right? Work on the speakers so you can hear the far end as best as possible. Make sure those speakers are reproducing that audio as close to good as possible, close to perfect as possible. Then let's talk about the video, right? Then let's work on being able to see everybody if that's a concern, if that's a need. But we get it backwards because you're right. The sound bars are a little bit of the bane of my existence because everybody and their brother has one.
I mean, they really do. It's insane really now. Everybody's got one. It's like you just walk around ISD and it's just like everyone's got a bar. And it will be the same thing with this ISD,
right? Well. It'll be the same thing with this ISD, right? That everybody will have one, and half of them aren't any good, right? But that doesn't solve a problem. And yes, sound bars are good in an application, right? And if you want to know what application, go find a really good AV designer because I'm not it. But there are use cases for sound bars. They do not belong everywhere. They just don't belong everywhere. So you have to have the understanding of the size of the room, the makeup of the room, the materials that make up the walls and the ceilings and the floor, and then what you're trying to do in that room, right? And you don't just throw a sound bar up because it's easy and quick and the IT folks can do it. It's just not. That's not a solution. It's not a great solution, at least. I mean, you got to understand what you're trying to accomplish in that room before you ever start ordering gear.
Yeah, I think that's like that, and that's part of the value that a good AV integrator or a good AV team brings is helping the customer along that journey of of what fits where and why. What's your take on like the kind of multi-camera scenario? Because that seems to be the trend going in as we record end of 24, start of 25. There's the kind of QSIS, Crestron type scenarios with multiple cameras outside, and then you've got the kind of Logi Neat scenarios of inside multi-camera kind of pointing out at the table. I'd love to get your perspective on that, Tim.
So in the scenarios that it makes sense, right? You're talking about large conference rooms, right? You don't put these things in huddle spaces. That's just silly. Overkill is a good word there. But what it does is it allows for a more personal connection at the far end, right? And there's a lot of smart people writing about return to office and where hybrid works and where hybrid lives. And if you look at a couple different reports about the state of work and you know where folks are working now, and hybrid or remote connection is going to happen for the foreseeable future. I do not see a scenario where we don't ever need video conferencing. Okay.
Genie's out of the bottle now. There's no going back. I think I hear it certainly in Europe pushing for 3 days. Kind of is a max push at the moment because people appreciate a combination of office and home for sure.
Well, and here's the other thing. So let's say that everybody goes back to the office. Okay. I work at a company that has 37 locations.
Yep.
Are we all going to get in the same room? No.
Yeah. Are you going to meet every customer in person?
No. Right? Apple is one of the companies. Apple and Amazon are here in the States are the two biggest ones right now making noise about everybody's going back to the office, right? Okay. How many locations, how many offices does Apple have, right? 2 right now, and they're getting ready to build a 3rd, right? Amazon, how many offices do they have? Again, 4 or 5, and they're getting ready to build a 5th one. So we can put this whole return to office thing over here. You're still going to need those connections, okay? So that's the base. With those connections, that means the far end has to be accommodated for. That means you have to design the system for the people in the room and especially for the people on the far end. So that's where these multi-camera setups really, really shine. Because if you and I and 10 of our other closest work colleagues are sitting around a conference room table, and Tom and I are sitting on the far end of that table, and the camera's over there, right? Well, they're not going to see us very well. But if you have a multi-camera system that is smart enough to go, oh, Tom's talking, let me switch to this camera and let me frame him well. And that means that the far end is going to get a much more up close and personal experience with Tom as he's talking and he's enumerating and he's, I talk with my hands. I am not Italian, but I do talk with my hands. So, if I'm making a point, a lot of times my hands are going to be moving. And so if I'm at one end of the table and you can't see me being expressive, right, or what have you, you lose half of the communication. And so those multi-camera solutions are really, really great for the far end because that means the person who is experiencing it, right, who is remote, regardless of the reason why, can really kind of connect with whoever it is talking in that room.
Yeah, and this is another area where the kind of IT/compute influence has brought that technology in, brought the price point down. Like I remember we worked for a particular bank long ago, and they had literally somebody sitting in a mirrored room side by side doing the remote control of the cameras, and that was like the boardroom experience. And now we can bring some of that with AI direction and people recognition and things, and really start to bring that technology out to less expensive rooms.
And that's what I mean. I love AI, so don't misunderstand this, but that is one of the aspects of AI that even people who don't like it are able to point to and go, okay, that's kind of cool, right?
Yeah. You can. I love that as well. All the codec improvements we've had as well. Like AI doesn't have to be like a text prompt. There's a lot we're getting that is adding value in our space for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Tim, for people who are more in like my world, the kind of Microsoft Teams, IT Pro world, from your point of view, what would you suggest they look at from AVNation and what you're doing to kind of get more into that world, dip a toe in? Is it following the podcast? Is there some specific content?
So there's a couple of things. On our website, we have a UC specific section, right? So anything that deals with Teams, deals with Zoom, deals with Google Meet, even though I think it's horrible. I'll get a call later from Google. That has everything that you could possibly need and want and desire. Certainly, there's other section in there. There's an audio section. There's a video section. There's an AV over IP section, depending on what the topic that you're looking at. Right. That we did that specifically and strategically because as we talk more and more to IT folks, it's like, okay, that's great. But what's a white paper about? Because this is our old menu. Like, what's a white paper? What's a podcast about? This way, we're funneling people into the topics and the areas that they're interested in. Right? Yes, AV Week is a weekly wrap up. Certainly a great one to take a look at. And then we've got one that focuses on the higher education space, right? We've got one that focuses on control and automation. So those are some really, really great ones as well. And then just look around and poke around the website.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tim. Appreciate what you're doing to bring the knowledge and bring people together. And looking forward to swapping over and coming on your pod and getting grilled.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom.